If you were to tell me that teabagging in a video game would be a form of sexual assault, I wouldn't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with that as that statement being true or false. What I do know is that there is a common issue that's happening, not just in pop culture at large, but it's showing a lot, especially in gaming these days, video games especially, about political correctness and so called wokeism in video games. Now, I'm going to take the position based off of my personal experiences and just my overall interactions with gaming in relation to political correctness. Honestly, when I decide to turn on a game, it doesn't matter what type of game, but when I decide to play a video game, I'm trying to escape the world of what we have to go through on the day to day in terms of our politics, in terms of our beliefs, either in religion, the way we make our money, the way we do everything that represents who we are in the real world. We deal with it all the time. But when we turn on our consoles or our PCs or our phone apps to games, for that moment, if it's like 5 minutes, if it was 10 minutes, if it was 20 minutes, if it was 40 minutes, if it was an hour, we try to distance ourselves away from reality. But what I've noticed a lot, and I see it in criticisms from game writers, game commentators, and just enthusiasts alike, there's this common debate that's going on right now about the question of political correctness in gaming. And I mentioned this article about video game teabagging as some sort of starting point for us to have this conversation. I know other commentators are talking about it. I figure it's a good topic, and I want to put in my 2 cents. It's been minutes, moments, days, if we will, that this conversation has been going on. But this kind of represents a common thing that I've noticed for many, many, many years, and this is like the first time that someone is linking sexual assault to teabagging. But anyway, there was an article that was released on PC Gamer. This was released probably 2 days ago, and today, by the way, the date of this recording is July 28th. So this came out, Tuesday, Monday of this week on the 26th. And the game Valorant, which is basically a first-person shooter type of game, kind of similar to Apex. It has like a Fortnite type vibe, but it's a competitive game. There's a lot of professionals that play the game. And apparently 2 Valorant players were temporarily suspended for participating in basically riot-sanctioned games due to some sort of incident that occurred over people teabagging other people in a game. So apparently one person teabagged another player from their same team in an actual contest. And people are arguing that that particular action is a form of sexual violence. In fact, let me share one part of the article to add context. The situation kicked off in late June as the Valorant's Discord, a community set up to elevate women and non-binary Valorant players, after a member referred to as Player A in Riot's ruling, posted a message equating teabagging someone in-game to sexual assault. It sparked a fiery debate on the Discord server, with both these 2 players, Dawn and Rezera, being involved before moderators went ahead and closed down the entire server for a week. All right, a few things. First off, I never knew in all the years that I've done teabagging to my friends that would be a form of sexual assault, right? Let's not forget where the origins of teabagging come from. I remember teabagging from the perspective of, these early first-person shooter games. I remember seeing this a lot in Halo, where you can crouch to kneel down as you're attempting a shot. Now, remember, I'm talking about early Halo. So there's not a lot of opportunities for one to emote during that time. So if you're, you got a kill off of somebody and you're feeling kind of dandy, sure, you're dancing over somebody and you're teabagging essentially. Now, the problem here with the whole sexual assault thing is that you're talking about something that is more meant in the physical, and it's not even physical to the extent that what that person is doing is literally creating physical harm. First off, it's creating harm to a fictional character that is not real, right? You yourself personally is not having dangling balls or dangling whatever, right? These characters, unless you're very explicitly illustrating the character as a male or a female, I assume not much of a gender, especially in certain types of games, right? But let's assume if we are going to go with the normative, there's female, male, or both, or whatever, right? If you're gaming and you're trying to show off, like, yo, you're some real tough shit and you want to stick it to somebody, right? Teabagging comes off to that regard, right? Like, no one is like, yeah, I got this kill and now I want to shove my balls into your mouth. Like, no one is going to that extent. And honestly, if you are that enraged that you would go that far to demonstrating that you want to dip your balls in somebody's mouth, you should probably reconsider playing video games for a minute and get your shit in order in terms of your life. But I digress. The emote of teabagging stemmed not with the assumption that you literally want to, like, you know, do what I just said seconds ago, but you're just showing some level of dominance based off of a particular kill. It's not meant to suggest that one wants to commit some sort of harm. And even if you want to claim that that is a form of harm, to whom? To a fictional character that's literally not you? I mean, dare I say it, but since when did us gamers get so fucking soft when it comes to gaming expression? Look, I came from a generation, and I'm black. I came from a generation where I would be on an Xbox Live, you know, on a server for a game. It doesn't even matter what game it is. I used to play online a lot, Madden, and people would talk shit on voice chat to the extent that they would call people the N-word. How many times when I used to play old COD, like for me it was back in the Black Ops days. I stopped playing since, but the point is, back in those days, back in the 360, the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 even type era, people would talk shit and say some really racist stuff, and they would get booted out. Now, me probably receiving that statement, or others in the game that identify as black and is receiving that from racist folk, I mean, again, we're online, right? And we're playing a fictional game. Unless you're attributing to an action that can possibly cause physical harm to me, I'm probably the last one to give a fuck. And if my feelings were that hurt, I would stop playing the game. But I find it very troubling when people want to subjectively add their politics into, you know, competitive spaces. In this case, and I can be wrong, but unless the contest has explicit rules that indicate that one must not, teabag another player, or one must not commit acts that are considered sexual assault, which that in itself is ridiculous. But what I'm trying to say is, unless these particular rules were institutionalized, how are we supposed to enforce such subjectivity when it comes to an action like teabagging, right? Like, there's no rule that says that you can't teabag. Just because you have politics about the action of teabagging and how for some way it leads to sexual assault, that you want to deem that as, okay, that's unacceptable. Fine. If you have your beef about people doing that, you can make a case to whoever runs these events and maybe institutionalize the rule. Or, I don't know, play a different fucking game, right? Or maybe step away from the keyboard or step away from the controller for a minute and do something else, right? For the amount of times that I've been called the N-word in certain types of games on multiplayer, has it stopped me from gaming, let alone going back to those same games and play it again? Probably not. And sure, some of these games may have systems set in place where if someone is using profanity or using things that are subjective to, abuse, they deal with that. They permaban players. That's why you have moderators or admins that are able to facilitate those sort of things. But to suggest that a move that is basically treated as an emote now in the year 2022, suddenly it is a issue of sexual assault, especially where the person is not physically being attacked. I don't know. I find that to be kind of a stretch for the sake of being politically correct and woke in a video game. I mean, what I find very interesting about this whole shit is that here are people being super, aggressive with their attitudes and thoughts about teabagging for games that are all about shooting and killing people as like the object of the game. Think about it. Y'all are upset about people teabagging in a game where you're literally killing other people. Like, if that doesn't make sense, then I just don't get it. I don't get it. Right? You can't have your cake and eat it too in that sense. You can't just be like, well, you know what? We need to be more ethical with how we engage this space in terms of inclusion and positivity of certain identities participating. And you're doing that in the context of a game where the object is you're killing people. Right? It's not like you're talking about somebody teabagging in a soccer game, right? Like, or if, in Madden, when you do a signature move for a touchdown, the signature move is like teabagging. I would understand if you're simulating a human experience through the game of football and then someone teabags as like a signature move in the game. Again, I still feel like it's virtual. Like, if you're that pressed that this person is doing something in this space, then go somewhere else. Sure, you can tell them to do the same thing, but let's face it, trolls are going to troll, and people are going to do emotes of this nature. And we can over-regulate how one expresses themselves, but then we're going down a slippery slope where anything that hurts somebody's feelings, now, reactively, we're going to basically change the game to accommodate people. It's kind of the same way when people bitch about, these games that are created are only specifically isolated for certain populations, be it because it's very difficult to play and the learning curve is hard, or it's intentionally built for certain players to play a certain way, and if you can't do it, you can't play. I mean, look, there are different strokes for different folks type situations in gaming that we can all agree one way or another. We kind of know where we fit ourselves into in terms of the types of games and its spaces that fits us, right? Like, I play FPS games, but I'm not as good as all of my other friends, right? Also, I know that a lot of trolls exist in these spaces. So I know to myself, sure, it's not going to stop me from playing this game, but I'm not going to invest in spaces where I feel like y'all are not doing enough to at least regulate language that could potentially cause massive harm to somebody, right? Like, how many times have I seen cases or heard cases where people use the N-word in a lobby, and then before you know it, they're saying things like, yeah, and I'm going to threaten your parents, and I'm going to do this to your family, and I'm going to fine you, and then I'm going to SWAT your house or whatever. Like, believe it or not, there have been cases where people do that sort of thing as a sense of trolling. I don't know how teabagging falls into that like category of that's fucked up in gaming, especially since teabagging was a used form of emote or emoting from back in the day, right? And again, if you really feel that there's a lot of issues relating to sexual assault, why don't you take that same energy maybe and deal with like people dealing with sexual assault in the real world? Right, where the impact is felt far greater, right? I think that if we're talking about fucking video games with the intent is to escape from the realities that we're in, and if people want to be douchebags about it by emoting, people need to set up rules that suggest that you can't emote in that fashion, and then people have to make a decision whether they want to play the game and abide by the rules or don't play the game because they think that the rule sucks, right? Give players the choice and thus institute these sort of rules into your tournaments, so that way we're not having to play the ethical guessing game of if this is right or not, right? The writing is on the wall, and whether we agree to it or not, that's our choice when we decide to play in the competition. But to subjectively ban players based off of something that, from what I've been reading, it doesn't seem to be like institutionalized as a rule that you can't teabag. I don't understand why that person now has to play the judge, the jury, and the executioner in terms as to what is deemed acceptable when it comes to things like teabagging, which again to me I think is a form of emoting, right? Like, again, bigger issues to deal with. This should not be one reason where people are being canceled out of spaces, right? Because again, if we're going to seep in a lot of the culture that exists in the real world into spaces like this, then honestly, I don't know. What's the point of daydreaming, or what's the point of visualizing in certain spaces where the rules are a little different? And in this case, I'm not saying, and let me be very, very clear about this. I'm not condoning that people should, bully people, right? Like, again, I don't see how teabagging for 5-10 seconds in a game to show that you're powerful is bullying. If that's the case, when, again, using the football example, if a guy scores a touchdown and then they start doing a celebratory dance, is that bullying too? That's basically emoting in IRL. Like that is literally, an example of that in real life. And if that is not considered bullying, how is teabagging, which falls kind of on the same level to me as like a signature move in football? Like, seriously, if we're calling these things sexual assault, we're setting up a very slippery slope in terms of how little gestures of action, even if it's just meant to, jab at somebody and poke and make fun of them for a hot second. I mean, geez, grow a fucking tough skin, right? Like, bigger things to deal with. And if you're tight that you're getting teabagged, I can also say this, not only with this, maybe get better at the game so that way you can shoot back and you can take out people too. And who knows, maybe you might feel elated enough to teabag. But hey, don't do that, because that is bad. Look, you may disagree with everything that I'm saying right here, and you should disagree if you want to. I think that's a good thing about being able to talk about what is on your mind. But I will say this: we're dealing with teabagging, and whether or not that is a form of sexual assault in a game that's all about killing people. You see why this doesn't make much sense? Speaking about political correctness and stuff, I'm going to do another video, and I'll kind of treat this like part 2 on this topic, but it relates to GTA. And apparently GTA 6, that's going to come out probably in a couple of years, they're already getting tons of flack from people suggesting that the game is becoming too woke. Now, mind you, it's still in production. It's still in development. Like, the game isn't out. We haven't seen any gameplay, no demos. We're just getting big picture ideas of what this game ought to be for GTA 6. And people think that it's already too woke. And let me give you part of the reason, and then I'll leave here. It's because the protagonist or protagonists are Latina women. Yeah, think about that. Until then, if you like what you heard, if you like what you see, give me a like. Also, if you really, really want to appreciate all the other material that I've produced, feel free to click subscribe. That's the best way for you to see my content and maybe see much more of it pretty easily through the algorithm. So again, just click subscribe if you really want to watch the other parts of the content and of other content that I have. And if you're really, really interested in putting in your 2 cents in a conversation, type something in the chat. Let's make it interactive. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you and talk to you again soon.